Ordwere a córte gael. An gédal is mínlum cuidú leis an méid atá ráite I le na folk na córsforsa casanta. May I say straight away how warmly I agree with the Minister on her compliments to the Defence Forces for the part that they have taken in the commemoration services. And may I, through the Minister, congratulate the Government on the great success of the ceremonies to date, and to thank all, as President, thank all those who have been associated with bringing it a hút con críocha. It's my very great pleasure to have been asked to open this home of the military archives here in Cohal Barracks. Today's ceremony, as you have heard, are part of the centenary year of the Easter Rising of 1916, and they are such a fitting recognition of the fundamental importance of the military archives towards our understanding of the founding events of the state. Agus is mín lumsa freisin mo wikas o cria gol leis an Cearnfort Patrick Kennedy, an typica gegianas an cartlan milita le Patrick Brennan banistó tjunskadal hiunskadal pinchin an cartlan vilata. Agus lena goliacha fad ina feile her an stór pwaibli iantag seo, an cartlan seo a caurian lin tishkentar an ang buniha atá cáte. I extend my sincere thanks to Commandant Patrick Kennedy, Officer in Command of the Military Archives. I join with the Minister in doing so. To Patrick Brennan, Project Manager of the Military Archive Pensions Project, and to all of their colleagues who are the diligent custodians of what is a great public repository, archives that contribute to making audible for us the voice of the past. I'm aware, too, that a solemn ceremony took place in these barracks early this morning, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the brutal murder of the great pacifist, socialist, suffrage activist and journalist Francis Sheehy Skeffington, and of his fellow journalists Thomas Dixon and Patrick McIntyre. The three men were summarily executed here at what was then called Portobello Barracks by a firing squad of 7 men under the command of Captain Baun Colthurst of the Royal Irish Rifles, without any trial or any charges having been brought against them. Injustice also defined the treatment of Hannah Sheehy Skeffington, who suffered the invasion of her house, attempts at blackening her name, and who was refused access to her murdered husband's personal effects. We have such detail in all of this in the fine work of Margaret Ward in her work of 97. The man bearing responsibility for the horrendous execution, Captain Baun Colthurst, was released after a brief hospitalization and awarded a military pension. The fact that one of his victims, Francis Sheehy Skeffington, had been endeavouring to prevent plunder and destruction from spreading as the fighting was unfolding in Dublin City on those early days of Easter week only reinforces the cruelty of the event. Walking with his cane, distributing leaflets calling people to a meeting. Cohal Barracks are thus a very important place of memory for us, as the site of extrajudicial executions that symbolise the worst kind of arbitrary rule, and today as the repository of crucial records of our past. As many of you here will know, the function of the military archives is to acquire, preserve and make available the records documenting Ireland's military history, from the formation of the Irish Volunteers in November 1913 to the present day. Under the terms of the National Archives Act 1986, the military archives comprise the archival records of the Irish Defence Forces, the Department of Defence and the Army Pensions Board. They also hold over 1,000 private collections of relevance to Ireland's military history donated by families and individuals. And I do so thank those families and individuals. I was pleased to learn that earlier this month, the military archives acquired yet another important private collection, namely Brother Allen's library archival collection, which includes, among other treasures, an original copy of the 1916 proclamation, as well as the letter that Patrick Pearse sent to his mother before his execution. This complements other collections, most notably the records of the Bureau of Military History and the Military Service Pensions Collection, that lend the military archives such crucial significance for our understanding of Ireland's revolutionary period. Over recent years, access to these archives has increased, and together with their own work and analysis allows a new generation of scholars to profoundly reassess and redefine our grasp not just of the Easter Rising, but also the War of Independence and the tragic events of the Civil War. The Bureau of Military History was established in 1947 by the Irish government in collaboration with a committee of professional historians and former Irish volunteers, with the aim of recording the history of the Irish revolutionary movement from November 1913 to July 1921. The Bureau's investigators, most of them senior army officers, spent a decade compiling hundreds of detailed witness statements, a mine for historians indeed, collected from those who had been direct participants in those events. By the time the Bureau was wound down in 1957, it had accumulated over 1,700 first-person accounts, 36,000 pages of evidence, and over 150,000 documents detailing the revolutionary experiences of members of Sinn Féin, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, Common Amon, the Irish Citizen Army, and the Irish Volunteers. The Bureau thus forms the richest and, in relative terms, the most comprehensive oral history archives devoted to any modern revolution. The second body of material, the Pensions Collection, covers the period from 1916 to 1923. It comprises 300,000 files associated with the applications for service pensions sent by veterans of the Easter Rising, the War of Independence, and the Civil War, as well as applications for allowances made by the dependents of those who were killed on active service or by those who were wounded or incapacitated while on duty during the period. There is much to learn from the details of these applications. For example, the differentiated treatment according to female applicants, or those who found themselves on what was regarded as the wrong side of the divide during the Civil War. The digitisation of the witness statements collected by the Bureau of Military History and the progressive release of the Military Service Pensions Collection constitute, I believe, two of the most significant government initiatives to accompany the ongoing decade of commemorations. And I compliment and thank the Irish government for this, as future generations will do. They are very important steps towards a democratisation of historical research, giving universal access to the first-hand accounts from previous generations, and enabling us to appreciate all the more fully the experiences, the motivations, the hopes, and sometimes the disillusions of our forebears. To mark the opening of the Military Archives' new building, the occasion that brings us together this afternoon, the Department of Defence have released a fourth tranche of material from the Military Service Pensions Collection, which contains the files of over 47,000 applicants who applied for the 1916 medal, or the Service Medal 1917 to 21, awarded by the Irish state to qualifying veterans. These medal files do not only throw light on the special regard in which those who participated in the struggle for independence were held throughout the first decades of our fledgling state, but they also offer a detailed insight into Ireland's social welfare history. They document an initiative taken by the government of the 1940s, that is, a good 12 years before the first Social Welfare Act of 1952, to introduce a new form of welfare payment specifically dedicated to medal holders, through the payment of special allowances to those veterans who could not improve their living standards because of old age, infirmity, or ill health. And it would reach but a few. On a more personal note, may I say how meaningful the release of the pension files have been to me and our family, through the information they convey about the experience of my father, my paternal uncles, my mother, and my father's sisters, all of whom were active in the War of Independence. My father John enlisted with his brothers in the Ballycar Company of the 1st Battalion East Clare Brigade during the War of Independence. He went on to serve for most of the period with the 3rd Battalion Charleville in the Cork No. 4 Brigade. My mother was Vice Chair of Cumanamon in Liscarroll, and her brother was adjutant of the local battalion. My father's sister was in Cumanamon in Ballycar, County Clare. The Civil War divided my father's family. My uncle Peter was in the National Army and took part in the handover from the British forces and served in Renmore Barracks, Galway. My father, on the other hand, spent from August of the year 1923 as an internee in what was known to the prisoners as Tin Town in the Curragh camp. The pension files record his later long and exhausting correspondence at the time of the economically difficult 1930s for a small pension, which was eventually granted in 1956, 22 years after his first application in 1935. Indeed, the pensions files tell many personal stories of hardship, as so many who fought for Irish independence then struggled to support themselves and their families in the subsequent decades, often suffering from ill health. And as some had found themselves excluded from the pension scheme, women earlier on because of gender, class, or political choices, or indeed because many found it difficult to round up the references required of an unrelenting and unrelieved bureaucracy for details. Today, I also want to salute the Military Archives Image Identification Project, which invites members of the public to provide valuable information on old photographs of soldiers. Such initiatives, which foster our citizens' engagement with the past, are most important. They're very positive, and indeed an awareness of understanding of history is, I firmly believe, a necessary foundation for the crafting of a meaningful understanding of how our present circumstances were made possible, the effort involved, and the sacrifices involved. If nothing is after this year, I hope all of us will have an appreciation of the importance of history. I think as well these archives are also the response of citizens to such initiatives tell us very much. All over the country there has been an overwhelming enthusiasm, and during my visits as President to various parts of the country, I've witnessed everywhere profound interest and pride in the events we are commemorating this year, an eagerness to investigate the local variations of those events, to solve old enigmas and rouse too, to salvage the stories and memories of so many quiet lives that all across Ireland were touched by those revolutionary years. One of the benefits of the wealth of archival material preserved in the new building in over 35,000 boxes is that it conveys the experience of ordinary activists, if one should use such a word at all, in addition to that of the leaders whose photographs featured on the borders of the proclamation in the classrooms of our childhood. It allows and will allow for a more informed and inclusive memory of those who sacrificed their livelihoods, their prospects, and their health so that we would be free and live in an independent republic. Delving into those archives, amateur and professional historians alike can thus reach out to the inspirational women and men who participated in the Irish Revolution, not as abstract or mythical figures, but as people who, for various reasons, and sometimes quite intuitively, dedicated their skills and their energy to the cause of Irish freedom. These archives are also reshaping the scholarly understanding of the period, allowing historians to explore such themes as education, kinship and friendship connections, associational activity and intellectual influences. The lens, as it were, have been widened to include the intellectual excitement of the pre-revolution period, the flourishing of movements, the energy of publications, the interest in socialism, feminism, language revival, cultural nationalism. Such material as the witness statements of the Bureau of Military History enable us to listen to the story of those who fought for a new Ireland as told in their own words. And while those statements may not fundamentally exhaust, as it were, our general interest or knowledge of what occurred, they do enhance our understanding of the motivations of the men and women who fought for Ireland's independence, preserving something of the texture, the humanity, the discovered courage, and the complexity of the past that is not always recorded in conventional sources. They enable us to address such questions as what led people from ordinary backgrounds to fight for Irish freedom. What did they think they could achieve? What kind of republic were they willing to die for? These questions are important ones for us today as we continue the work in our own times of crafting an authentic and inclusive republic in which all of our citizens will be enabled to flourish. Mar focail is mínla mar ó rís go bhfuil áthas ar mar uachtarán a héireann, a bhein o'r John te niu, ag ascail den fuirgan of niu seo den cartlan vilt. Is funtas é seo tá bhad níos comparátí dómh siúd a bhfuil símachas a cartlan. Idir staire agus ganás a roinig, mar minio a stair hiailig a fisrú. Agus tugan sé, cuma tímplocht, sáháilte, leis an tafad liúgfar seo a stóráil, ní a bháin na tafad ó éirí amach na cásca, ach tafad óglaigh na héireann le Lochpart, I mission na náisiúnéantathe, thar lear ar bhlan an bhliain 1958, go dtí látá nniuán. May I reiterate then how delighted I am, as President of Ireland, I repeat what I have just said in Irish, to be opening this new building for the military archives. This new facility offers a much more comfortable environment for all those who are interested in those archives, whether they're historians or citizens eager to research their family history. It also provides such a safe environment for the storing of those invaluable records, not just of Ireland's revolutionary period, but also of our more recent history, and of the service of Óglaigh na hÉireann personnel overseas as part of UN missions, which have done so much for the reputation of Ireland and continue to do so, such as they have been developed from 1958 to the present day. This is such a hugely important site, then, of our national memory, a place in which are preserved the voices from our past, guarding them from oblivion, from any distortions of history, a sure foundation for our future and for the interpretation of our story. Agus is privilege am an oscail de dhéanamh, gur míle maithagé.
President.